Hello folks, my name is Carl and welcome back to my channel. If you're new to the channel, thank you so much for joining us. Please consider subscribing to the channel as it goes a long way to help me. And if you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for your support. As you may have noticed, there are some few changes going on and there's a little bit of rebranding going on. This is just to make the channel more identifiable and also make it easier for you guys to find my videos on YouTube. So do not be alarmed. We're still going to be providing the absolute raw facts about Canada to help those that are already living in Canada and those that are interested in moving here. Okay, thank you so much. So in today's video, we're going to try to answer a very important question. How many hours can you work as an international student in Canada? It is very important for you to know this, because if you violate the conditions of your student permit, you could find yourself in trouble with IRCC. Now, stay with me to the very end, as I promise to share some tips on how to avoid violating your study permit restrictions regarding the number of hours that you work. Traditionally, students in Canada have been allowed to work up to 20 hours per week in Canada during regular school terms or semesters. Now, what that means is that while school is in session, while lectures are going on, while school is not on break, students traditionally have been allowed to work 20 hours per week. But during the pandemic, that policy was changed a little bit. So the government announced a temporary policy that allowed students to work more than 20 hours per week to a maximum of 40 hours per week. So a full work week usually has 8 hours per day times 5 days, making 40 hours. So essentially, students were allowed to now work quote unquote full time up to a maximum of 40 hours per week. So the reason the policy was also put in place was to ease the country's labor shortage, while also giving students the chance to earn more money. Okay, so students could earn more money to pay part of their expenses and stuff like that. But this temporary policy came to an end just this year, in April of this year. I think it was on 30th April 2024, the policy was cancelled and students could no longer work, or can no longer work 40 hours per week while school is in session. Now, I keep saying while school is in session, and I will explain that later on. Now, the reason the policy has also been cancelled is that the immigration minister says that students that come in should come into school and not to work. So that policy was cancelled and international students can only work 20 hours per week. Okay? But in fall of this year, in 2024, in about a couple of months, or probably even in this month, the government has also announced, or IRCC has also announced, that it is going to make another change to that 20-hour policy. So IRCC intends to change the 20-hour limit to 24 hours. Now, it has not given any specific date when that policy would come into effect. But basically this fall, students will now be allowed to work 24 hours instead of 20 hours. So 24 hours per week off campus while school is in session. Now, I have been mentioning on campus and off campus and while school is in session. So let's explain these. So on campus work refers to employment within the buildings or grounds of a school. Okay. Now, it could include jobs that are being offered by the school itself. So you could be working for the school itself. You could be working for any of the faculty members. You could be working for student organizations, or you could even be working for businesses that operate within a school. Okay, so any of these jobs are considered on-campus jobs. Now, these on-campus jobs have no limits regarding the number of hours that a student can work. Okay, so the 20 hour limit, which is going to change to 24 hours per week, only applies to off-campus work while school is in session. Okay, so on-campus work, like I have already mentioned, working for faculty members, working for the school itself, working for student organizations. Now, these have no limits. Okay, these have no limits. So if you're a student and you find yourself working in any of these jobs, do not be worried about violating your student permit restrictions by working more than 20 hours, as that is considered on-campus work, and this policy does not apply to that. Now, with off-campus work, however, now that means working for any organization, business, or corporation that is not operating within the school campus. That is where the limit would apply. So if you're a student looking at working for any of the corporations, organizations, or businesses outside of the school, then please know that you are only allowed to work 24 hours per week while school is still in session. Okay, 24 hours per week. Again, I keep saying while school is still in session, so now let me explain that. Now, while school is still in session means while lectures are still going on, while the school is not on break, while classes are still in session, and all of that. Okay, now that is where the 20 hours per week or 24 hours per week policy applies. Okay, so if the school you're attending is not yet on break, lectures are going on, then you cannot do more than 24 hours or more than 20 hours per week. Again, don't get confused. I'm just saying that currently it's 20 hours per week, and that is going to increase to 24 hours per week this fall, as IRCC has announced. Okay, but in the meantime, while school is still in session and school is not on break, you cannot do more than the limit. Okay, so currently it's 20 hours. Make sure you're not doing more than that. Now, I'm going to talk about the consequences of exceeding the number of hours that you're allowed to work. Okay, because trust me, there are consequences to that as well. So basically, those are the two things that I'd like you to understand before we move on. First, on-campus work is different from off-campus work. And then working while school is still in session is different from working while school is on break. So while school is still in session, you are only allowed to work 20 or 24 hours per week when the limit is extended, okay? But when school is on break, as a student, you are allowed to work an unlimited number of hours. So if school is on break and you can secure full-time work during that break, go for it, okay? You are not going to face any consequences for that, okay? Because school is on break and you're allowed to work full-time while school is on break. Unlimited number of hours, you can do overtime, you can do any hours that you can do that while school is on break. But immediately school reopens, you go back to working the number of hours that IRCC places on international students. The limit, currently 20 hours, and it's going to extend to 24 hours this fall. Now, let me also chip this in, okay? You can also do remote work as an international student, okay? If you're able to find remote work for an employer that is outside Canada, it's remote work, okay? And the employer is not in Canada, you can also do unlimited hours for that employer. So please keep that in mind as well. IRCC is fine with that, and there are no consequences for that as well. Okay, so just keep that in mind. There are people in Canada that are working for employers in the US, okay, or in other European countries. So if you're able to secure that kind of employment, I just want to put this in that you can also do unlimited hours and you'll be fine, okay? Now, another question that we must answer is that, do all international students qualify for this? Can all international students work 20 hours or 24 hours per week while school is still in session, and unlimited number of hours while school is on break? Or are there some requirements that need to be met? Well, you guessed right. There are requirements that need to be met. So it's not just any international students. And I'm going to read some of those requirements for you. Now, requirement number one is First of all, you must have a valid study permit. Okay, now that goes without saying. If your study permit is not valid or there's an issue with it, whatever is wrong with the study permit, get it fixed first. Okay, make sure your study permit is valid. Make sure your study permit is valid. Okay, that is the first requirement. Now, the second requirement is that the student must be studying full-time at a designated learning institution, or DLI. Okay, now DLIs, or designated learning institutions, are institutions that are allowed to bring in or allowed to admit international students. So while you are applying for schools in Canada, make sure that first of all, these schools are DLIs. Okay, now if your school is not a DLI, you might not be able to get your study permits to come here. Your study permit application might just be refused for the mere fact that your school is not a designated learning institution. Now, the IRCC has a database of all the schools, so you can just type in your school name in that database, and it will tell you whether the school is a designated learning institution or not. Okay, so make sure you know this, and make sure if you're working with any agent to come to Canada with a student visa or a student permit, make sure that agent knows what they're doing. Okay, now the third requirement, the student must be studying in an academic, vocational, or professional training program that is at least 6 months in duration and leads to a degree, diploma, or certificate. Okay, so make sure that the program that you're in school for lasts more than 6 months. So if you're in Canada as an international student for a program that is 3 months, 4 months, or even 5 months long, you may not qualify for that opportunity to work while school is in session, okay, and while school is on break. So you may not qualify for that. And then also that the program that you're pursuing leads to the award of a degree, a diploma, or a certificate. No, right? So, and then the last one is that the students must have a valid SIN number. A valid SIN number. SIN is SIN, stands for Social Insurance Number. This is similar to what people in the US will call the Social Security number. Okay, so that number is tied to you. You need that number to get your salary from employers. You need that number to probably get credit from banks, to apply for credit cards and stuff like that. It's your personal number. Okay, so these are the requirements that you need to meet in order for you to be able to work as an international student in Canada. Okay, all right. Now, let me also say this very, very important thing. Another thing is that students have to be full-time before and after a break in order to work. Okay? Now, what does that mean? It simply means that students can't start work before they start their first school semester. Now, if you are coming to Canada for school, chances are you applied for your visa and you got it way before school actually starts. So when that happens, most students would travel to Canada a month or two before school starts. Okay, so you're already in Canada. School is starting somewhere in November, and in September or even in August, you're already here. Okay, now what most students are tempted to do during that period is, if I'm here and school has not yet started, let me go and start working, or let me go and find some work, some part-time work to do. Don't do it. Okay, don't do it. Very soon, I'm going to be talking about the consequences of breaking your visa restrictions as a student. Okay, now don't do it. So the requirements are, you should be a full-time student. So you should have started school before you go working on your study permit. Okay, so please keep that in mind as well. Now, I have been saying this because there are very, very, very severe consequences if you violate the rules regarding your student permit. So please listen carefully. If you're a student in Canada, make sure you stick to the rules or the restrictions of your study permit. Now, if you do not, assuming you're working 40 hours per week when you're supposed to be doing 20, or any other thing that violates your study permit, here are some of the consequences that you may have to face in the long run. Okay, you cannot run away from them. Now, number one is that you may end up losing your student status. Okay, now, mind you, when you are working and you are being paid through your SIN number, this is a number that the CRA has. Okay, it's tied to you, like I mentioned. So now, if for any reason IRCC is able to find out that you are violating the terms of your study permit, you may lose your study or your student status in Canada. Okay, that's number one. Now, secondly, you may not be approved for a study or work permit in the future. Now, mind you, when you complete school in Canada, depending on the school you attended, you may be able to apply for what we call a postgraduate work permit, PGWP. Now, the PGWP allows students who have completed their school, to go look for work. So they don't need a job offer to get that postgraduate work permit. It's a work permit, but you don't need a job offer, so they get the work permit after completing school, and that allows them to apply for jobs in Canada. Now, if you've been violating your study permit restrictions or the rules, chances are IRCC may not approve that work permit. Or if you want to attend another school, and for example, someone has completed an undergrad and wants to go on and complete a master's program and needs to renew or extend their study permit, IRCC might deny that, okay, for the mere reason or for the mere fact that you have broken your study permit rules or your study permit restrictions, okay? And IRCC might also reject your PGWP or any other work permit for that matter because you violated the conditions of your study permit. So please keep that in mind. These are very, very severe consequences, and you don't want to find yourself in that mix. And then lastly, IRCC may also ask you to leave the country. Okay, that's quite extreme, but it could happen. If IRCC sees that, you're somebody that's constantly violating your study permit restrictions and stuff like that, IRCC actually has the power to deport you or ask you to leave. So keep that in mind as well. Those are very severe consequences, okay? Keep that in mind. Lastly, now, in order for international students to maximize their earnings while working part-time, I will be discussing in my next video some high-paying part-time jobs for international students and even for newcomers that are worth considering, okay? So look out for that in my next video. Thank you so much for sticking with me, and see you in the next video. Bye.